Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment of our program brought to you by Southeast Termite and Pest Control. Since 1971, 50 years, this family-owned business has been rooted right here in East Tennessee. And as all the other local pest control companies have sold out to national outfits, Southeast Termite and Pest Control has remained local. They're now the biggest locally owned pest control company in East Tennessee, which means every dollar you spend with them stays right here in this community. I use these folks. I can't recommend them highly enough. Southeast Termite and Pest Control. Check them out, southeasttermite.com. All right, here's what I mentioned as we went to break. Here's your SEC records for everybody since Rick Barnes got his contract, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. After the season, he flirted with UCLA, got a 5-year, $24 million contract. As we said at the time, it was the worst possible timing because he was going into a major rebuild, which was going to work against you, and which you see there in the records. He's above all the rest of the teams that you don't see listed, but right now, 6 schools have had better SEC records inside the league than Rick Barnes since he got his raise. After the Ole Miss game, there was a lot of squawking and a lot of barking about this because just not a great look for the where he sat. Is it fair? I mean, look, he signed the contract. He's a big boy. He knows how this works. But is it fair to judge him just on what he's making now and what the record has been since he signed the contract? Or is that a little misleading? Did you give him that money because of a bigger picture, what he's done with the program and what you anticipate him keeping it to in terms of standards?
I would say it's tough. I don't think the sample size is big enough. They didn't have the bodies last year. They didn't have the dudes. You could say, well, if you're making $5 million, you should have that. But ultimately, everybody has some sort of a rebuilding year. This isn't Kentucky where you have
even they this year.
Yeah, eight 5-stars that you just hope it works. So they didn't have the bodies last year. You're bringing in, Vescovi at mid-season, fresh off the plane from Argentina. He was unbelievable to do what he was doing. So I think it's too small of a sample size. We'll see where the postseason goes this year. If they get knocked out in the first round this year by, a 12 seed or a 13 seed or something, that conversation I'm sure will be revisited by plenty of folks. But I think the sample size is too small.
Well, and did you really want to go through the whole process again if you didn't re-sign Rick Barnes?
Exactly.
Who are you going to bring in that's going to run the program that way, is going to, and what was the big criticism early on? He doesn't recruit top 100 players, brings in 5-stars. You had a season of historical significance that you were rewarding. And now I think, they're going to get it back on track, or they have. But no, the record is what it is, and he's a big boy, and he knows they can do better.
In the time frame that we're in and dealing with what this football program and the athletic department is going through, it's almost like he's worth that and all of it because of not only the wins that he's had, the wins that he's having this year, the recruiting class that he's bringing in next year, and how he just carries this program, and to have some honor in the way that he leads this program. I think there's nothing that says about that deal that I would take back if I was as a fan or as anybody else. I think he's deserving of all that to where he's at.
I thought it was wise to give him the raise at the time, said it on the show. I still think it was wise because of what you're saying. Here's someone that is going to keep it between the guardrails. And anyone with a long enough memory here that's a Tennessee basketball fan knows that you have gone years and years and years driving off cliffs, hitting telephone poles. You weren't anywhere inside the guardrails for years on end. So to complain now about this team's 12-4, that kind of thing. Look, I remember years when you were 5-22. So 12-4, I'm not going to sneeze at that. Do you want to be competing for the national championship, certainly at that kind of money? He needs to get to a Final Four at some point. He does, to get that monkey off his back. But at the same time, you're paying a guy to run your program, keep it at a healthy level, and not have to do what you're doing with football, as Mark said, over and over and over again. So,
and if you hadn't done it, what are the chances Tennessee's going to get to hire Wright to replace him? Do you like that? Do you think Tennessee's going to go out and get a coach as good or better than Rick Barnes?
Somebody this week I got in a Twitter conversation with somebody who said, we need to get rid of this guy and go find a real winner. I said, who you got in mind? Like Shaka Smart, kind of like Texas tried to do with Rick Barnes.
Yeah.
And Rick Barnes has been better than Shaka Smart, who they spent more money on and was the hottest name in the country. And the guy said, no, Bruce Pearl. And then people are like, and Bruce Pearl. Bruce Pearl's record sucks this year. Bruce Pearl isn't going to the NCAA tournament because cheating. Who would have thought? Sorry, look the other way, Mark. But this idea that you're just going to go out and find somebody else, you're paying for the
coach.
you're paying for the steady Eddie you've got running the program.
Do you
That's
think
part of the money.
Do you think Kentucky would trade coaches with you right now?
They would have to.
What about LSU and the way they've been doing things? They were above you.
Ultimately, oftentimes what can be some of the best investment is invest more in what's already good to make it great. You don't always have to replace the good to try to go find the pipe dream of something that's great. You got something that's really, really good. Invest more faith in it, invest more resources in it, invest whatever you need to do to help make it great with the expectations. It's not always going to be great, but there's so much more certainty in what Barnes does and how he does things than going out and trying to find the next great guy.
I agree completely. The interesting thing that we're talking about here, and I think it's telling, and I said this on the show a few weeks ago, we were talking about, I think it was Gus Malzahn. Someone was saying, well, for football, if you go get Gus Malzahn, if he beats Alabama, he'll be okay. I said, no, he won't. Oh, yeah, fans would love that. No. Rick Barnes owns Kentucky. He's 8-5 against Kentucky. He's won 3 times at Rupp Arena, and yet you got people squawking, doesn't beat Ole Miss. Doesn't beat Bruce. It's whatever game you don't win.
Yeah.
Butch Jones beat Florida and Georgia in the same year. Nobody cared. Why? Because he lost to South Carolina and Vandy. That's part of this gig. So when you look at what Rick Barnes has done, try and remember what Tennessee basketball history is and go, okay, this Kentucky thing, we usually don't live here. This in the top 25 basically every year, we don't usually live there. So if you got to keep it in perspective. And while this year may be disappointing to some so far, and it's all going to come down to March.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all going to come down to March, and that's where he hasn't thrived yet. But to me, I would dial down the angst a little bit on this team at this point. All right, Mark Pankratz, thank you as always. Great insights. Always appreciate it. When we come back, Bob Hodge joins us, and we're going to talk about Josh Heupel, his staff, the staff he's put together that they won't announce, the defensive coordinator search, which looks, come on back, we'll discuss.